big stunner, 100. You stupid, just shut up. Keep breezy, I'm gonna. I'm big boy, done.
John, hey, it's episode 1, season 1. I don't know. Do we do that?
Why not? Because we could end on a cliffhanger, maybe, and get people.
I don't want the pressure of seasons. Let's just see what happens here with Suburban Kings. So
that sounds like a great plan.
But first off, current events. You watching the Olympics?
Man, I'll tell you, it was a slow start for me. But as of recently, I've caught a little more.
Yeah. What? Give me a highlight.
Man, the dudes running the track and field was pretty awesome. Those neck and neck finishes, dude.
That was intense. I watched a shot put. The Americans freaking crushed. Krause, I think his name is. Just big corn-fed looking dudes from the middle of America. Just went out there like everyone's throwing it. They measure in meters, so I don't really know how far they're throwing. If they could convert meters to something Americans could understand, like drone strikes or something.
Yeah.
But dude steps out there and like full on chucks it 2 meters farther than everybody on his first throw, which is I think is like 6 feet, and just and he's coming back from injury. So world record holder. That was cool to see. Yeah, track and field I like. It's easy to understand. It's intense. It's pure. It's just it's just my physical ability against yours, but without throwing too much skill in there. I know there's some skill involved in some of the throwing, obviously, but really cool. And obviously, I love skateboarding and surfing, so I'm watching as much of that as I can too.
Sweet. I men's basketball. I mean, dream team as a kid. I had those McDonald's cups, like when Jordan and Bird, those, and those lived in my pantry as a kid, and I always went to those cups.
I miss the glasses you get from like McDonald's and Burger King. The even the toys you got in a Happy Meal.
Burger King used the lead-based paint, to like paint their characters on the side.
I bet people are killing on eBay with those things. So, but I want to get to the topic of this episode, which is, one of the kind of the main overarching kind of zeitgeist, if you will, of why we're doing this podcast is for just you and I to stay connected to culture, especially the arts. That's something both you and I really care about. And a conversation I always have with people is, music, movies, or books. Like that's kind of, I like to get past the small talk and talk about that kind of stuff. And, I'm always asking, what are you listening to? And my heart always sinks a little bit when I'm talking with people who really haven't brought new music into their rotation since like college or high school. And I tweet out every month or so, hey, this is your monthly reminder that they kept making music after you graduated high school and college. And so that was kind of the premise for what I threw over at John for us to talk about today, which is let's go back and basically the last 24 years since 2000. What are artists that we've discovered? We're trying to avoid artists that we were already listening to who either, like Audio Slave dropped their first album in 2001. It doesn't count because that was 2 bands we were already listening to, right? Depeche Mode, Bad Religion, Eminem dropped some bangers a couple of years ago, but we were listening to them before this time window. And I'm interested in discovery. So what have we discovered? Yeah. And it's okay if they kind of, maybe you didn't hear them in the late 90s. I think I have at least one on here where they dropped an album in like 99 or 98. I wasn't listening to it. It was kind of just a local band, their first album. And so, I wanted to hop right into it. And so what we're going to do is 5 albums that you discover, 5 artists, and you can pick an album if you want, that you discovered between 2000 and 2010. Then we'll do the same. 5 albums that you discovered between 2011 and 2024. And I have one that's so recent. I just discovered it in the last couple months and actually bought tickets to the concert coming up in October. My wife and I are going to go to. Super stoked.
Sweet.
But let's just jump right into it. John, give me one album artist, your first one of the 5 from that first window, 2000, 2010. What's one that you just Yeah. Love.
Yeah. Well, dude, right there, you were talking about how you send out your tweet. And your tweet is like, this is your friendly reminder that they still release music, and I think this is an awesome conversation because I remember actually, buying this album and purchasing the physical, CD.
And this was kind of like the end. This was like the end. I would say 2003 may have been the last CD for me.
Golly. Man, I held on a little longer. I think for me, I'm just not quite as technically inclined.
It could have been but somewhere in there. 2003, 2005, I think was the last CD.
Yeah, but I think just the fact that it made that shift makes it and then there's other significant shifts, just even in my life, that's made it so much harder to remember that they still release music. But just thinking back then what music was like and going into a record store, discovering music that way,
what quick hit.
Yeah.
Album or artist you discovered because you walked into a trusted record store. For you in Austin, that would have been Waterloo probably, right?
Yeah.
You go to Waterloo. And you just ask the dude back there, maybe he's a white guy with dreadlocks or whatever, like the dude that, and hey, anything I should be checking out? Did that ever happen to you? And you pick something up and now it's like,
yeah. Geez. I mean, I want to say that I have a memory of being in Austin and a Spoon album got released.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to just commit and purchase the album. And so they were playing one of the songs on it because it was close to the release date. And the dude let me take the CD, and there was these listening rooms where you could take the CD, go in, put it into a CD player, put on some headphones, and you could kind of skip through the songs and then make your decision. And I remember, I want to say that was an album that I purchased in Waterloo. I don't know, Spoon. I remember the musician, but I can't think of the name of the album. But it was a release back in the day. But so I haven't done that. I don't even remember the last time I've walked into Waterloo.
Or any record store?
Yeah.
Spoon has a ton of albums.
Ton of albums.
That probably would have been 97 or 98. Soft Effects or 30-Gallon Tank, which is an EP.
Yeah. That was it.
96 Telephoto was a full album. That was their first album, I think. Anyway, very cool.
Yeah. But anyway, so, okay, answer back to your question. Album I discovered working at Starbucks. It was playing on the radio. Starbucks cared about music. I know now it's probably changed, and early on it was very different. I was working at Starbucks at 2002 at the time, and a song kept playing, and I went in the back and I looked at the little satellite player we had, and it would tell you the name of the album and the track. And so I went and I purchased the album Let Go by Not a Surf. And that man, I spun that. I so many times. I had just moved up to Colorado to go to college, and man, it was snowing, and just driving up by the mountains and putting that album in. Man, it did something for me.
All time. I'm gonna chuck Inside of Love onto our Suburban Kings playlist. Going to be on Spotify.
Throw that in there.
So that'll be in there. So the first album I have on my top 5 from that window is Deltron 3030, which is I don't want to say it's a full on cheat because Deltron is Del the Funky Homo Sapien, or I think most people who aren't from a hip hop background would only know some of the raps he did on some of Gorillaz tracks, right? But this album is written and produced in a week was the idea here. And so Dan the Automator and Del locked themselves in the studio for a week and put a concept album together. And it's basically a futuristic story about the year 3030, and Deltron is like this hero. So it's pretty cool. And it has some story to it. and it's just incredible. And it really kind of set the tone for where hip hop was going to go, because it kind of set the mark as radio was dying. They said, we're going to stick with real hip hop and lyricism and the art of this. And the radio hip hop is going to just stick with rapping about partying. And so it's just an incredible album. It's been, I listen to it all the time still. It's constantly in rotation. Deltron 3030, great. They have a second one they did just maybe 10 years ago called Event 2. They just did it again, another week, kicked out an album. And that album's fantastic. And they brought on all kinds of like actors to do voiceovers. The Lonely Island Boys do a track on that album, but
that's awesome.
It's an incredible album, and I would say rarely a week goes by where I don't at least kick a couple tracks on there. So
do you remember how you stumbled upon Deltron, like how you kind of found your way to it, or it found its way to you?
Yeah, I worked with a lot of youth, skateboarders in particular, and I filled up a minivan with skaters, and we drove, high school kids, and we drove up to Northern California to go snowboarding. And one of the kids put this album on, and it became our album for the trip. And I was hooked ever since. So that's how I found it. So yeah, listen to the kids; they know.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. Right on.
Second one.
Okay, second one for me. I'm going to jump in with Death Cab for Cuties. And I have a tough one between Translanticism and Plans.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go with Translanticism. I had a buddy who was a drummer in a band, and we went out golfing together. I'm not a golfer at all. Caddyshack is like
I've never like golfed before, but
yeah, it's hilarious going out and playing golf with me. I'd like to use as many mulligans as possible, but he put on the album as we were driving, and it was catchy. And I remember they had done a separate thing before that album with the Postal Service, Such Great Nights.
Yeah,
and he told me about that, but man, when he started playing that
which
album,
is one of my favorite cover songs ever.
Yeah, who sings that?
Iron and Wine, right down in Dripping Springs. Your boy,
yeah. That's a good cover.
Yeah,
but yeah, man. I mean, they're kind of poppy, and but easy listen, but super catchy. Those two albums are like full listen albums for me. I can listen.
Most of their albums are like that. I actually have one of their albums on my honorable mention. So.
Nice.
Love it. And I think I discovered them. Great stuff. Yeah, no, I sonically, they kind of carried the torch as, I don't know what we called, what I consider the Holy Trinity, the Smiths, Depeche Mode, The Cure. Some people will throw New Order in there. I don't think they're on that level. I mean, they're as good, but I mean, successfully, they're not on that level. But I think they kind of carried that torch of the new breed of whatever genre that is, progressive, alternative, or whatever. But yeah, love some Death Cab. All right, my second one. This one's definitely on my, as with Deltron 3030. This one's on my Desert Island discs for sure. Like top 10 all time. And even for my family, like this, if my family had an album, it's actually this album, because my kids were at the age where they were starting to really tune into music and develop their own taste. And that's Band of Horses, Cease to Begin. One I recommend to a lot of people who struggle to listen to newer music, just this band in general, because it's very guitar centric. And I know most of the people I know, at least just from what I'm in my world, who stopped listening to music, all the music they like is just super guitar centric, rock and alternative, your classic rock if they're older. And so Band of Horses in that vein, and they're just incredibly good band. They're amazing live. And I discovered this album listening to All Songs Considered from NPR, which is a podcast I still listen to. And a lot of the albums, actually several on here, a third of the albums that are going to be on my list, I discovered there because they every week are talking through the new releases and playing some samples, and they kind of cover everything. They don't just stick to the popular stuff. In fact, they kind of ignore it, because you're going to hear Taylor Swift, you're going to hear, whatever, is it Drake? You're going to hear that. So you don't need to go to a podcast to get it. And so Fleet Foxes, or excuse me, I gave one away. Band of Horses. He played, Is There a Ghost? They played that. And like, that song has this huge swell and just chest punch, but it just was a different sound, and had, the just kind of the reverb, and it just sounded huge. And listening at your headphones for the first time, it was like, I'm in. Like, that's one where I immediately go, because back then when that came out in 2007, we were still buying albums. And so, I immediately bought it, like right there. I am not even going to do anything else but buy this album for $10. Yeah. And it's been constant rotation in our house ever since. Still is.
Dude, yeah, right there with you, dude. One of my favorites. I love there's that southern twang to it, that southern,
but without being
crazy, country,
being southern rock.
They
flirt. They flirt with a country sound every once in a while. So if you like country, and they even have, they have a couple songs in there where I would say they could probably play on a country station. Do country stations still exist?
Yeah.
Does radio still exist?
Yeah.
John, hit me another
one. All right. So, man, I discovered this album watching a movie soundtrack. We, got to bring up soundtracks.
Soundtrack or score?
See,
kids don't know. There used to be both. Right? They put out an album to market a movie, and it would have songs on it. And almost none of those songs would be in the movie. Maybe the closing credits or the opening.
That's right.
And then the score was what was playing during the movie.
Man, and that's a really good point.
I miss soundtracks.
This is both. Yeah. This band did
sometimes.
Both. This band did both, and it's very score-like in the movie because this band has no vocals. It's just guitar and drum,
right?
A little bit of bass drum, a little bit of bass hidden in there, but explosions in the sky. The earth is not a cold, dead place. I went and saw the movie Friday Night Lights, and I like the grit of that movie. The way it was filmed and the way it was shot just really kind of captured like the Texas dust of West Texas, and Friday Night Lights of the football. It wasn't the cheesy football movies. Going back and watching it, it's kind of cheesy, but they did a good job with like the action in it. But the whole time, the score of the guitar underneath that was like, man, I love the guitar in this. Yeah. And then come to find that I went and saw this band, Explosions in the Sky, at an opening for another band I'm going to mention. But dude, even catching it live was awesome. There wasn't any singing, which is really weird.
And that's tough.
It is, but I love it. I love this. Yeah.
And that's to be that good of a musician, and also interesting enough to have enough hook and emotion. And for someone who doesn't listen to like electronic music, really, I like songs. I love musicianship. Don't get me wrong, but I'm not going to listen to like Yngwie Malmsteen or just somebody just wanking on a guitar. Like it needs to have some structure. And so Explosions of the Sky nails that. I mean, they're right in there. Love it. So my third one, now going back to hip hop here. This one also kind of flirts with the rules a little bit, but not a whole lot, because this rapper remade himself. So if you remember the rap group from the early 90s, Third Base, Pop Goes the Weasel, the Gas Face, right? Yeah. For what it's worth, MC Search is a great follow on Instagram. He runs a restaurant in Manhattan, and he's great. And it has just great people on, that come by. And so anyway, so on that album, you may have been introduced to a couple bars that were rapped by a rapper called Zevlov X. Mm. Well, Zevlov X, didn't have a great career. You probably, that might be the first time you've ever heard that name outside of, MC Search sang it in a song. Zevlev of X in somewhere around the turn of the century, which is weird to say, took on the persona MF Doom or Metal Face Doom, and he kind of wears like this. He always wears a mask. He wears like a gladiator mask that's silver. It looks just like kind of the mask that Maximus wears, but it's silver. And MF Doom, Born Like This, 2009, is my favorite of his albums. He's got quite a few, and he is so gangster. MF Doom, he died, I want to say 2022. So sometime like October-ish, 2022, he died of cancer. Nobody knew he had cancer, apart from maybe his wife and immediate family and his tight circle. And he didn't let anyone know he died, or his estate didn't let anybody know he died for 30 days.
Jeez.
And then 2 months or a month or so after that, he released an album. MF Doom he's often the most common description you hear about MF Doom is he's your favorite rapper's favorite rapper. Lyricist to the core. I discovered him probably because the close connection to, there's a lot of overlap with Deltron, where it's just very lyrical. So if you like Del, you like, KRS-One, you listen to, you really like hip hop, you're going to run into MF Doom. And so I can't remember where I first heard MF Doom, but yeah, you can't ignore him. He is that good. But again, it's not like if you like just what I would consider, if radio still existed, radio hip hop, it's not for you. It's kind of, it's palate forward, if you will, because it's about the lyrics, and you listen to it and it's like watching a gymnast do incredible technical things with lyrics.
Awesome.
And so if you enjoy, like, maybe if you like some of Eminem for that reason, because Eminem's one of the best ever at it, then MF Doom might be worth a listen to you, but always on rotation for me. And funny story, and this is kind of sets the tone for one thing I recommend a lot of people do, which is listen to the kids, especially your kids. My kids were exposed to Deltron, and then they get Spotify. Spotify might be the best 15 or 19 bucks or whatever it is I spend for the family plan every month, because we listen, all of us, all four of us, listen to music constantly. And so what I've always done is, since the kids have been listening to their own music, whenever we're in the car, it's like, hey, you put your stuff on. What are you rocking? And one time, I can't remember, Steele probably was, freshman, 8th grade, maybe. He puts on MF Doom out of nowhere. I never told him about MF Doom. The algorithms probably fed it to him because I think he was really digging Deltron and where that led him. And he loves that kind of underground, hardcore hip hop. He turns it on. I had to pause it. I'm like, bro, I didn't know you were ready for this, but that's awesome. I love MF Doom. So listen to your kids, man. MF Doom, Born Like This, any of his albums are fantastic. He does tons of collabs, or did tons of collabs. Rest in peace.
Oh, man. Okay, man, that's awesome. I got to check that out. My son's into the hip hop and the rap, so I'm curious to see how that.
Put him on the MF Doom.
Okay, I'm going for it. That's going to happen. All right, album for me. This is an all-time album for me. I have to say it, and I wonder how. I think it's pretty mainstream, but In Rainbows by Radiohead is an album that came out in this time frame. And it seemed like this album was they continued to push the envelope with sound and even just with music. And this one was another big step forward. And it seemed like, their early stuff would get the MTV and radio time. You could hear those songs, Pablo Honey on the radio, and, and they had their music videos, but this one didn't have the radio hit type music on it. It seemed like they were exploring in like a new.
Well, radio was dead. I think radio died right around that time, right? Was that 2007, 2008?
Yeah. But even just listening to it, it doesn't have that radio sound to me. But anyways, man, that album, and like you reminded me about the release of that album, and it was like, pay what you want for it and get your, digital copy.
Yeah. They only sold it, or at least initially. So again, like around 2007, we were still buying music, right? gosh, maybe around 2015, somewhere between like 2012 and 2015. I think we just stopped buying music. We started subscribing to services. I think, I don't know. I can't remember these days, but yeah, they name your own price. You could buy the download on their website only initially. And I remember I was so stoked. I paid the full $10, which is what a digital album cost at the time on iTunes. Really cool album.
Yeah.
And I'll allow that cheat. Total cheat, but I'll allow it.
Have to. I just talking about albums that got a lot of playtime.
Well, he's got solo stuff, and then the what's the other little kind of some of the Radiohead guys, the Smile. They've done some cool stuff. I mean, I've seen them live, and consummate performers. Just every one of them is out there on the stage, just bleeding for the music, and I love it.
Totally.
And if you haven't, if you love a live performance, the basement tape from that is amazing
on YouTube. Go to YouTube, catch it there.
What is the basement tape?
Man, it just kicks it right off. There's a couple of them, but they take an album and it's like you're a fly on a wall in a performance, but it feels like a studio. Yeah. And they just step right into it and they play through the whole album like live in the room. And it's it's killer. It's so good. The recording's good. The video's good. I mean, it's as good as the album is, like listening to it. Like it's a really good performance. But you get the visual of what you were talking about. I mean, Tom York, when he steps on that mic, he goes into an alternate universe. He's in like the shadow realm in his own world, like performing where he's just dying and bleeding for his music, where it just captivates you. You get lost.
In speaking engagements a couple times, I've played a Tom York video. From his solo album. He has a song called The Clock, and that album is mostly electronic. But he's on Henry Rollins' talk show, and he plays The Clock live. Just him with his guitar and a Neumann U87 in front of him. And it is one of the greatest solo performances I've ever seen, because it's very intimate and he's all in. I'll put it in the show notes. But yeah, the Tom York, In Rainbows is my second favorite Radiohead song easily, or album, and they're my favorite Radiohead album. For my money, I think is the best album ever put together, and that's why did I just blank? That's OK Computer. OK Computer is the best album ever made. And it's up. And I used to debate is Dark Side of the Moon or OK Computer better, and as I've gotten older, OK Computer is the best album ever made. I will fight you.
Well, that's the part about this album is it's like, where do you go from there as an artist? And that's the thing about them, is they continue to just push where they were going. And they kind of have landed, like you threw out their latest stuff, and they've kind of landed in some spaces of kind of like no man's land. But that's kind of what they've done, is
they don't care. They're doing what they want to do.
They've just pushed the sound, and they've stayed with it. And I love how they reinvent that, and that,
I'm gonna hit you with my next one, and that is Fleet Foxes' self-titled album from 2008. Again, a discovery from NPR's podcast, All Songs Considered. They played White Winter Hymnal, and it was my first introduction into kind of this newer folky singer-songwriter thing, which eventually most people probably listening to this probably only got into that when Mumford & Sons, they were kind of the nail in the coffin. That's usually what happens with a music movement. There's like a local scene where people are making this new sound, then it kind of spreads regionally, or at least it used to. And then someone figures out it's got commercial viability and they go bigger than everybody else, but they kind of have to water it down a little bit. Nothing wrong with Mumford & Sons, not really my preferred one, but Fleet Foxes was the first band I got into in that space. And then it became, you had like this Decemberists were kind of in that vein. Later the Avett Brothers, and then some of the more folky stuff, like a Father John Misty and Bright Eyes, that kind of stuff. But this was the first one, and it was, when I first heard it, it was like nothing I'd ever heard before. Like it was these layers of kind of harmonic singing. And it was incredible. And that was another one where it's like, okay, I immediately bought that album and it became a favorite, family favorite. It's on all the time. Their self-titled album, I love. They've had a couple ones since then. But yeah, love that album. Fleet Foxes.
Yeah. Right on. Okay. Well, hey, I mean, you kind of just like hinted right to it. I'm going to throw it in there. I'm going to go with, let's see. I gotta remember. I wrote down the name of the album. Oh, that's it. I'm Wide Awake. It's Morning, 2005 release of Bright Eyes. You said Bright Eyes, and man, there's just something about that music that he's got his own sound. You know, he's kind of like a little bit of a tortured voice, if you will, when he sings. And just the folkiness of some of the tracks on that album are easy to sing along with. It's a fun listen, and man, that got a lot of playtime as well in my truck over the years.
And again, it's important. This is the time period, in 2008 where we stopped listening to the same music together. There was like the big hit that took over the radio because it's just not a thing anymore. Where do we all listen to the same song? So nowadays it's interesting to see what's going to happen next. It's kind of what's going to trend as a background audio on TikTok is really the only place where there's commonality, where the youth are. It's interesting to see. So you see a lot of artists right now breaking there, where they had a catchy, 30-second segment of their song that went off on TikTok, and then boom, they took off. No, good.
Yeah.
Love the Bright Eyes. And then he did a super group later, right?
He did. Yeah. Yep. It went on Monsters of Folk. Went to Stubbs Amphitheater.
Yep. That was my first Stubbs experience. Pretty cool. Great performers.
Yeah. I mentioned that Friday Night Lights show. They did a track on Deviltown. Bright Eyes did that.
He covered Deviltown.
Daniel Johnson, local Austin, icon.
Yep.
I love their rendition of that their cover of that song. So it's pretty cool. Played really well. Show.
Daniel Johnson's original, that's his best song, I think. True Love Will Find You in the End is right there, but that's like, if you haven't heard of Daniel Johnston, most people have not heard of Daniel Johnston. There's a great documentary. It's I think it's The Devil in Daniel Johnston or The Devil and Daniel Johnston. Really cool documentary.
Yeah. About
essentially an autistic dude who I'm saying that as someone who I don't know if he's been diagnosed, but from all appearances appeared to be some autistic in some way, doing really weird art, and was popular in Austin, and has some murals and stuff around town that are still there.
How are you? Like an alien with the eyes. That was
Jeremiah the Innocent was actually we painted it on my son's wall when he was a kid in Austin. So pretty cool. Okay, my last one from that first decade of the 2000s is Wilco's Sky Blue Sky. I know, and this one I was discovered at that time. I was working with musicians. I was actually in a startup building a platform to train like studio people on how to use Pro Tools and Ableton and all that kind of stuff. So I was interacting with a lot of musicians, and I also worked with a guy named John Suhr who made boutique guitars. So I was around a lot of musicians, and similar to MF Doom, this was kind of like at the time in their peak. This was musicians, especially guitar-ish musicians, it was their favorite band, Wilco, and I hadn't really heard it, and it was recommended so many times. I went and checked it out, and the first album I grabbed was the latest one, which was Sky Blue Sky in 2007, and love that album. It's kind of, again, it's similar to Band of Horses when I'm talking to someone who's kind of hung up on guitar music and hasn't really got past classic rock or even 80s glam rock or grunge music. Wilco is where I send them, along with Band of Horses, because it's very guitar centric, and very, it's, musicians love it, but it's also super, super catchy. I mean, it's not, it would never be a radio hit. They never were. I often described them at the time, 10, 15 years ago, that they were the most popular band in the country that you haven't heard of, because radio was fully dead. But they were making a killing, selling out shows. They weren't playing stadiums, but they could do whatever they want. They were selling albums, very successful in that new era. Love Wilco.
I did too.
You and I got to see Jeff Tweedy go play a solo show with his son on drums. That was awesome.
So glad we did. That was. Love him.
So Wilco, that's my rec for people that hung up on classic rock. Check out some Wilco. I think most people would say Yankee Hotel Foxtrot is their best album. But I also think those same people say that Paul's Boutique is the Beastie Boys' best album, and that is 100% not true. But that's another conversation.
Right on.
All right. 2011, 2000 to now. So basically, I've added a couple of years there because, why just do 4 years? So again, 5 albums that you've discovered in that time period. Now we're getting late. Like, we've been out of college for a while. We've got kids. We're up to our neck in traveling to sports and all that kind of stuff. You as a middle-aged dude, you're starting to rip away from that. Plus the way we used to consume music, or at least discover it on the radio, is gone. What hit me with one?
Well,
what'd you hit?
You just tapped on so much right there. I think that's important. It's important for me to point out that 2008 was, we started having kids, and and in the shift of music, it's so wild to just stop and look back at music and where it's come and where it is, and how it found us, or how we found it, or how we listened to it. Like, literally, that this was about the time where I started falling off. People wouldn't just hand me an album, which is different than somebody sharing hey, you got to listen to this, or hey, you got to see this, and sending a link, I think that my discovery of music really started slowing down in general. Where
most people's do, right then.
Where I wouldn't just go catch a show of a band that I had heard about, that I just got to go see, and not really knowing much about them, or, so I would just kind of naturally, even to this point now, go back to just what I always know, go back to my favorites, and just get kind of stuck there. And now I'm like the dad, oh, you're such a dad. Listen to dad's music, But thankfully, thankfully my kids are, I was able to introduce them to some of the bands, and some of the music that we grew up on. And it's like, my parents did that for us. They had vinyl records that they would put on, or even cassette tapes, and it would play in the house, and so this for me is important. It's an important conversation in terms of culture and music mattering, and that music still comes out. But really the catch for me is now that I'm getting older, I think I'm just the average kind of just getting stuck in my way kind of stubborn dude, where I'm turn that ruckus down, where I got to just kind of take a step back and say, okay, what is going on? And what even though at first listen, I may not be used to it, I may not be ready for it, but to kind of hang in there and, stay connected, with what my kids, but what's happening in the world around me, and not just write it off because I'm just so stuck in what I've always listened to and what feels comfortable, and this little safe spot of my own music.
Be curious, keep growing, keep learning. So what do you got? Hit me with one.
Okay. So this is a little bit of a cheat based on the time frame, but this carried me into, and I think when I discovered it, it was actually in 2011. But I before I subscribed to Netflix, I would turn my TV on, and I didn't have cable. And the TV still picked up the basic stations, and one of the basic stations locally here is the PBS. Yeah. And about the time I'd go to bed, every once in a while, the Austin City Limits TV show, studio show would come on.
Legendary show.
And
I grew up on it.
One of the things that I think captures me, or will get me into music, and we were dancing on this, was an artist believing in and dying for, and expressing and emoting their artistic expression of what it is that's inside them. It's like they're calling in this world to just get their music out without regard of how they look or how people are going to receive them or what people are going to say about them. And so I caught the performance from Arcade Fire.
Oh,
and the lead singer, kind of the whole band has an artistic vibe happening. And when they started playing, I immediately was believing what it was that they were playing. And so they released an album called The Suburbs. And just at that time, when I got my hands on the album, we were, living in the suburbs as a young family. And it kind of took me back to when I was a kid living in the suburbs. And there was a nostalgia vibe to it that kind of caught me and I got lost in. And so, man, I love that album and that band, man, super creative, good listen, awesome performers.
And that may be one of the last kind of alternative albums that had a big, that hit big outside of its own sphere of influence. I think now we're all the music genres are kind of compartmentalized. If you don't listen, because it's all very algorithmic. If you don't listen to certain bands, the algorithm isn't going to feed you another band. And so important album, because I think it marks a point in history where first off, amazing album, where you had a band kind of take over as much as could have been taken over. It wasn't like Nirvana in 91, but become part of just the cultural zeitgeist of the moment. I don't know if we'll see that again, but really cool album. I'm going to hit you with one. This one is just an all-time. This is a Desert Island disc for me. 2014's album Singles from Future Islands.
Yes.
Discovered them watching Letterman. I was up watching Letterman, and they were the musical guest. And that's kind of one of my main reasons for watching talk shows. I like to see the musical guest.
Yeah.
Because those live performances are different, because they know this is my chance. So I have to give you what I actually am and be real. And the front man of Future Islands just goes so hard, hard to describe their music because it's bass, drums, and synth. There's no guitar. It's almost but the singer kind of has a punk edge to him, and just he growls but is also very melodic when he needs to, and just it was a new sound. It was a sound that I hadn't heard before, and it was good. It wasn't just weird for weird's sake. It was good, and the whole album is like it's a full on listen. That's one that road trips. That's always on a road trip. That's a front to back. I like listening to full albums on road trips because it helps with the time. And Future Islands Singles 2014, and you and I have got to see them live twice now. We saw their ACL taping, which is incredible, and then we also saw them at Stubbs. But great listen, still constantly on rotation, all time album for me now.
Heck yeah, dude. Yeah, man. I don't want to. I think we should combine forces together. I think that's fine. I think we both got to put our vote together, because this one is too important to me to I have to fight for this one, and I think you have to fight for it too, because we shared in the experience together and discovering it together.
We were both discovering this album and this band, and so No, I think we share it.
Oh, well, I think I got to throw it out there though. I got to throw out what you just shared and what I got to share together.
Go.
So this one,
okay,
Bon Iver. We got to put that out. Bon Iver.
Yep. Yeah, I don't know how to say Bon Iver, Bon Iver. You say however you want. The self-titled album.
Yeah, I think I've been in Texas so long, we get lazy with how we pronounce things. I got that Bon Iver. And then you hear it. Names of streets are so terribly mispronounced.
Yes, I hadn't really listened to Bon Iver. I hadn't really listened to Bon Iver. I was aware of them, and kind of it was on at a thing. You'd be at a restaurant or a coffee shop, and Skinny Love would play. That was kind of their hit, if you will. prior to this. And we saw their ACL taping, and it's important to understand Austin City Limits. One, I grew up on it, loved it. It's how I got to see live music as a kid. It started in the 70s. And when a band plays Austin City Limits, they're trying to play as true to the album as they can, because this is they're documenting history here. Like when you're playing there, this isn't like any live show. This is forever. And so that album, those first 3 tracks kind of come together as almost like a medley. It's seamless, and they open the show with those 3 tracks. And I remember halfway through the first track, I turned to Jon and I'm like, "Bro, I'm in. Like, this is it. I'm in." So incredible performance, good album. Well, then that's a tie. Then you hit me with your next one. If we both are taking that one, which I'm good with, because that album's awesome.
Okay,
hit me with another one.
Okay, so for me, this is about the time where I started discovering music from my kids. Kids. My kids started introducing music to me. And this is where they started fighting for airtime in the vehicle, where like they didn't just bob their head and dance along to the songs that I would put on. They would start telling me, "No, Dad, I want to listen to this," or "Hey, check this out." And so my son came in my truck. He, plugged his phone in and he played a track from Juice WRLD, Lucid Dreams. And,
love that song.
As soon as it started playing, I was like, man, they have a sample from Sting, one of Sting's songs. And that was like, I'm always interested in how hip hop and how rap utilize. I love how they mix, albums and how they take samples. And, I'm surprised at how much I've actually come to listen to and appreciate what Juice has done to the music community within hip hop, within culture. I mean, like, my kids, it's like he's an icon. He's a legend now. And so, but when that came out, there was something different about it. He had a different style that I think stood out and kind of had his own thing going that I think made way for some newer, maybe less respected, artists. But man, I love that track, and I've even come to love some of his newer stuff too. But Lucid Dreams, and that was a classic when that came out, and it caught me right away. It was super catchy.
Rest in peace, Juice WRLD. My wife's a huge Juice WRLD fan, but I described them. I would say, some of the rappers, they picked up the guitars around that time and started putting in kind of, the rockers put it down and went synth and electronic, and some of the rappers picked up the guitars. And so it's kind of like this emo music with guitars and Juice WRLD, fantastic. It's different. It's almost hip hop. It's almost R&B. It's almost emo. And it's catchy. Just super catchy. So awesome. All right, next one here. I'm going full hip hop, and that is 2016 Run the Jewels 3. So they just number their albums 1, 2, 3, 4, and they're up 2 now. So Run the Jewels is one. I have to give a warning. It is not safe for work. If South Park were a hip hop group, it would be Run the Jewels. Although it's not funny, but it kind of is. But what I'm saying is there is dark humor or dick jokes wrapping around really heavy truths. So they have a big message, and they say some important things in the kind of the socio-political dialogue, but they wrap it in dick jokes. And so it is not for everybody, but it's very hard. So because you have Michael Render or Killer Mike from Atlanta and LP from New York City. So you have a black guy and a white guy. And so it has some of that trap Southern sound to it, like huge bass, like just hit you in the chest. And then it also has just kind of the hard lyricism of just old school New York, think Wu-Tang Clan, all that stuff. And it's just hard hitting, incredibly good live. Saw them at the ACL Fest. Absolutely just destroyed. Just fantastic. But it's hard rap. So if you don't like the hard, if you didn't like Wu-Tang Clan, you're not going to like Run the Jewels. But that album is front to back. It's their best one. And the way they got started was kind of an accident where they were in relationship. They were, at that time, bands were looking for different ways to make money. So licensing was kind of a route to go. Like you would make albums or make songs specifically for movies or video games. In this case, they were working with the producers of Adult Swim and all the cartoons that were on late night on the Cartoon Network or Comedy Central, I think. And so they had already, I think Michael Redd had already done some stuff, and they got them to finance the first album and license some of the tracks to that. And so that's how they kicked it off. And it was such a big hit underground. Like, again, for the people that were really paying attention to hip hop, it was one of their favorite albums, that first Run the Jewels album, because it was so different. And so really, really cool. I love it. I listened to all their stuff, but that album in particular is my favorite of theirs. So Run the Jewels 3, 2016.
Yeah, man. Well, so I gotta throw my next one in the hat. Staying on hip hop, this is probably my last one. That,
yeah.
He's the hard to pronounce. I say the Worcestershire or Worcestershire sauce. You can't. How do you pronounce it? But XXX Tentacion.
Extension is how the kids. I hear kids say it.
I just say it. Call him X. That's just safe. That's safe.
Yeah.
I don't even know how I stumbled upon him. I don't know who introduced me to him or where I found him. And I think because his life his run was pretty short lived, but in his artistry, there was something in the art community within what he did that when he died, it just locked him in that legend status. He's forever going to be remembered, and his name is there. And because I think he did something different. And so, listening to his music, you said the word emo, and it's weird to think about like what my idea of what emo is and try to put that in with hip hop or with rap, because rap just feels like a genre in and of itself. But I think that that's what happened during this time with music and with him and with Juice WRLD, some of these other guys, where they brought in that kind of a voice of the emotion that maybe this next generation, that's so taboo to say that, or so cliche to say that, but it gives them a voice of maybe some of the things they're going through, some of the things they're feeling, and kind of gives them that outlet where it taps on something that's really real and kind of defines it. And so that was what was intriguing to me. And he's a unique listen, and it definitely caught my attention.
No, yeah, there's definitely some interesting stuff in there. If you haven't listened to hip hop or rap in a long time, don't be afraid to dip your toe into some of the new stuff, because it is different. A lot of it is like I think with all genres of music, there's probably millions of bands out there. Most of it you're not going to like, but there's stuff in there. You got to learn how to find it. So, good stuff. Okay. My fifth one from that area, I'm going to reggae. As my roommate in college was from Hawaii. So if I met a dude from Hawaii the first day of school and college, and turned me on to like real reggae beyond just Bob Marley's Legend, which everyone listened to, and plus a couple other things, being from California, we got some reggae exposure from Sublime, kind of gave us some reggae. So that was about all I'd really listened to. And then in college, he turned me on to all the good stuff: Eka Mouse, Barrington Levy, Don Penn, Burning Spear, all this stuff. And so and then I moved to Hawaii some years later. Ironically, is ironically the right word? But whatever. And got into even more reggae. So reggae has been a part of my listening, and I love reggae. And really, you got to get past the Bob Marley songs. Reggae is very diverse. It has really rowdy, hard, stuff. It has really mellow and everything in between. And 2015, a white guy who's actually really good, very well respected in the reggae community, Alba Rosie, his album Soul Pirate. I was turned on to this by the one person in my life currently who I can bounce reggae music off and listen to stuff. He turned me on to Alberose. He's like, yeah, check this guy out. He grew up in Trinidad, which is basically in the Caribbean. So reggae was life there. And so he grew up on it. So he turned me on to Alberose, Soul Pirate, white guy, crushing it with the reggae, which is rare. Not a lot of great new reggae coming out there. But really, really digging that album.
That's cool, man. That's awesome. We got to check that out. I mean, I didn't get a whole lot of exposure to reggae over the years. In Austin, they did a thing called the Marley Fest. I don't even know if that still goes on, but like it was like the annual.
Up until when I was there, so it was still happening in 2010, 2012, maybe.
It felt like the annual, hey, the cops aren't going to write you a ticket for smoking pot together day in Austin, where like, before you're a mile away from the venue and it's already the smoke cloud. Like it was just this weed fest, which everything in Austin.
All the reggae festivals are over here now. So there's like 5 this summer in Oregon because weed is legal. So that's where the reggae fest is.
But dude, like, so when it comes to reggae, I didn't fully, get into it, but like little hints of it, I feel like were like Modest Yahoo was sort of reggae. What would you call him?
He's absolutely reggae, yeah, 100%.
So caught him because he stood out, man. Like just total like Messianic Jew. Is that what he? Yeah,
he was or a Hasidic Jew, I think is what is.
Okay. I mean, performed in the rabbi attire or like has that imagery, and then like, you mentioned how like music is like nowadays, feeling so old saying that, but
we're old, John, it's okay.
Coming through the reels and the feeds on social media, the snippets of music, the little bits and pieces of music that take hold, that find you, that because like then all of a sudden it's a song, it's a piece of a song, or becomes a radio played type song. Bob Marley's, one of his sons had a song that came out through the TikTok that my youngest son introduced to me. I'll have to pull that up, but that's an interesting thing about music now, where I feels like I'm discovering music, arguably that being the primary way for me now. Through my kids or thumbing through.
So here it is. Here's my last one from this time frame, and it's very current. I discovered this in the last couple months, and the algorithm fed it to me. I saw it in Instagram reel as I was flicking through there, and we're back to hip hop. It's Prof, and the album is Horse. Actually came out last year, but it's now starting to gain traction. When I first started playing it just a couple months ago, the main single on there was under 300,000 plays. Now it's in the millions. So it's just starting to get steam in the last few months. Prof Horse. It is, again, I like lyricism, and for him, it's playful lyricism. So it's hard to describe because it's, if you're familiar with Little Dicky and like Macklemore, where it's fun, where there's a lot of jokes in there, but it's not really hard hitting, or, maybe some messaging and things like that. Mm-hmm. But I would say it's kind of like that, in that he's having fun. He's quite the character, but he's a very good lyricist. But more importantly, the production quality, the way the tracks hit. I mean, they're new sounding, super catchy, and just like there's lots of nuggets and layers in there, and I'm still kind of uncovering them. But yeah, my wife's totally into it. And my son and I drove across the country, right after I found this album. We spun it a couple times, and both of us were like, dude, what's the deal? How come neither of us heard of this guy? Because we both listened to a lot of the guests that are on his tracks. And so his marketing department needs to do better or something, or feed the algorithm better. But anyway, I found him. Prof Horse 2023. Sweet. Loving it. I'm actually going to go see him in October when they're here in Portland. But just kind of rowdy, if the Beastie Boys started today, had never played an album, it might sound like Prof Horse.
Nice.
It's good. Yeah. Worth a listen.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, if that's the way you put it, then yes.
Yeah. So grab it. Any more? You got one more there? Or are you good?
I gotta. Well, I mean, I don't know. I'm embarrassed myself going into some of the other things that were kind of there for me, but I think it's worth saying a guilty pleasure.
Give me an honorable mention.
I don't think this deserves an honorable mention, but maybe
okay, guilty pleasure then.
Guilty pleasure. Embarrassing to say, but I love it. On YouTube, there is a channel called Two Tone, and what they do is they take and you introduced me to the JDO head back in the day, which is mashup music, taking two different artists and bringing them together to make one sound, which was JDO head was Radiohead and Jay-Z, taking the music of Radiohead and bringing Jay-Z's lyrics over the top of it. And it was awesome. Right. So I hadn't felt that way, this way about music since then. But for me with this, guilty pleasure, and I got to give a nod to country music, but Morgan Wallen. I know that probably turned some stomachs just saying that name, but
Morgan
at the
Wallen.
same time,
is that? Oh, yeah, that's an androgynous name. Is that a dude or a lady?
That's a dude.
Okay,
that's a dude. He's a country. He's like the latest pop country musician. He's the hottest thing. He's like the current like Garth Brooks. He's selling out all
Super Bowl or something.
Yeah, he should. He will. He probably will. But they took him and they mashed him up over current hip hop music or current rap music, and so you can get like a Drake with like a Morgan Wallen, or you can get a Juice WRLD with like a Morgan Wallen, and they have this whole list. But what they do is they take Morgan's lyrics and they put it over the hip hop, and it works like remarkably well. I mean, it's a feel good. It sounds good, and if you've got decent subs in your vehicle or with you, it's like you're unfortunately that family at the pool that shows up with like the Bluetooth speaker. But it's like you got to listen to it out by a lake or cruising around with your windows down. It feels good. It's loud. It bangs.
I'm listening to reggae by the lake. Always.
That's probably a better vibe, dude. That's probably
my wife and I'll take the dog down to the river down here and bring our chairs, put our feet in the water, and I'll bring a little Bluetooth speaker and I'll just spin some Barrington Levy, some Eka Mouse. Yeah. Just chill, just vibe.
Yeah, I think if you want to crush a 12-pack of Bud Lights and get a really bad sunburn over your tattoos,
Morgan Wallen.
Morgan Wallen's your guy.
Well, let me rattle off some honorable mentions. So, Seosin, translating the name, 2003. This was the last CD someone ever handed me. I think it's the last CD that I was ever added to my collection. I was working with the roommate of one of the band members of Seosin, and come to find out some years later now, this is the pinnacle album in the screamo melodic hardcore kind of that vein. Think AFI. It's an amazing album. Seosin, translating name, 2003. Coheed and Cambria, In Keeping Secrets of Silent Earth 3, 2003. I think this might be one of the last songs where there was a video that went kind of viral for the one single off there, A Favorite House Atlantic, and I was hooked. It's metal. It's probably when I think just straight up metal. I don't really think I've discovered much metal that is in my rotation since Coheed and Cambria. A couple of their other albums since then I do still listen to, but just metal. Very. He's almost like a Geddy Lee type sounding, falsetto vocal. Love that album front to back, and it's a concept album. And then Avett Brothers, I and Love and You, 2009. Great album. This is towards the end of buying albums. This might be, around 2000, sometime in there, we started just streaming albums. So Avett Brothers, I and Love and You, kind of peak folk singer-songwriter. That's a great road tripper right there, especially when you're by yourself and you just want to vibe and sing along. Avett Brothers. And then a lesser known one, kind of from an indie label. Most of the bands on the roster in there are kind of in the punk hardcore vein. But there's this almost country singer songwriter named Sarah Cahoon. Her album 2012, Deer Creek Canyon, just beautiful, mellow. Again, if you're going to sit by the river and soak your feet, Sarah Cahoon, Deer Creek Canyon, great album. So, any honorable mentions recently?
I just honorable mentions for me, starting with the locals. I got to give a nod to Bob Schneider.
Yep.
Just a local Austin, icon. He's just played every venue in town. People love him. He's got that lovable personality on the stage, and he's got some hits or some songs, local hits, some songs that you can sing along to that you've come to love and know if you know him and seen him.
Yep.
Even within the local vibe, I don't know if technically they're like local anymore, but Spoon, we said their name, but they've just been around for so long that they've just been a band locally that you can just come back to, feel safe with, knowing, man, these guys are doing good music. Other honorable lightning round honorable mentions, like when I think about the transition from grunge and rock from the 80s and 90s, some of the people I held on to, Foo Fighters, but even like Queens of the Stone Age, they kind of got a little more stoner rock, but like even a little bit of like the Modest Mouse. So thinking of some of the rock that in the grunge that could have gotten lost along the way. I mean, I know you threw a couple in there, but you made some nods to some of those too. But got to give some honorable mentions to some of those bands.
Awesome. So, but message for everybody is listen to your kids and let your kids tell you what's up. That's a great place to discover, and that's where I'm hearing lots of cool stuff every time we're in the car. What are you rocking? My kids are older now. I got a senior in college and a 20-year-old. So
that's awesome.
We're a different space, but yeah, even on Instagram, I'll throw music their way. They'll throw stuff my way. So
yeah, with that though, I got to add on, be open to listening to music that at first listen, you just want to change it, especially if it is through your kids, because it's like they're more true to where the culture's going, because they're the current builders of it. They're the current, they're the current. So
they are the culture.
And there's some really good stuff there that if we won't be so quick to just write it off, that maybe it might become something that we regularly listen to.
Never stop. So on the show going forward, I'll try to keep my finger on the pulse of music every week and mention a few things. And we're going to do similar things with different genres of art, but music is what we wanted to kick off with because John and I are huge music fans. And awesome. John, last words?
Dude, good to see you, man. Get out there. Let's continue I appreciate you sharing music with me. We'll continue to do that. But man, good to be on here. Good to see you. And let's spin some new ones.
Awesome.